Whether you're talking about your pictures, music, videos, passwords, your phone, or those lovely tax records, you really should be using some kind of backup to protect yourself against data loss. This is even more important at work, where data loss can mean something as small as redoing a lot of work up to large fines. Your data is precious and it should be protected. In the cloud, we have several tools and services that can help you protect yourself from everything from corruption to ransomware. And Azure has a great backup service called Azure Backup, and we've done a whole series on Azure Backup already, which you can check out up here if you missed that. But today we want to shift gears just a little bit and talk about another solution. Veeam is an industry leader on backup solutions, providing a single platform to modernize backup and help you accelerate hybrid cloud and secure your data. And Veeam recently released a product in Azure that I thought was very cool and wanted to tell you about. So for the next few minutes, let's jump into Veeam Backup for Microsoft Azure. I'm Dean Safola, and this is the Azure Academy. Now, in full disclosure, this is not a sponsor spot. This is not a paid advertisement. This is in no way an endorsement by Microsoft or by the Azure Academy of using Veeam. However, they are a Microsoft partner who makes some really awesome software, and I just wanted to tell you about it. So, disclaimer out of the way, let's get to the good stuff. So the Veeam solutions that are available in Azure can be added to your environment by clicking on the big plus over here, and then you just type in Veeam. And you can see that they do have several different offerings that are available in the cloud today. The one that we want to focus on is Veeam Backup for Azure, of which there are two different offerings. One is the bring your own license model, and the other is the free model, which I'm going to be showing you today. They are functionally the same. However, the free edition will protect up to 10 virtual machines. The bring your own license version is what you'll need for anything beyond that. So we'll click on their solution, which you can read all the details about here. Reliably protect 10 virtual machines for free. And that does not mean that there will be no cost in this solution at all, but simply that there will be no licensing cost from Veeam to use their software. You will still be charged for all of the standard stuff in Azure, from the VMs that you're running to your storage, network, egress, all of that stuff. And to learn more, you can go to all of the links down here at the bottom. So we're going to click Create here to get this solution deployed. And I'll be provisioning this in a resource group called Veeam. And my virtual machine that I will be creating will be Veeam-0. And we'll scroll down here. You can see the image that we're using is pre-selected for us. And I've chosen to deploy a B4MS because it has a little more CPU and RAM. And this is a Linux virtual machine, so we need to choose to either give it a password, which I'm using, or an SSH key. And then we'll hit Next. And I'll be using premium SSDs for this because I want a little bit more horsepower on the storage side, since this is my main processing server. And for our data disk, there is already one that's attached as part of the pre-selected image. So I'll just stick with that and hit Next. And I'll be using an existing virtual network for this, as well as a subnet that I've pre-created for Veeam. And our main server here is going to need a public IP address to do some of the other configuration steps in a moment. And as we scroll down, we see a banner here that the Veeam image does have a pre-configured NSG rule. And if we click New here, you can see what those rules are. Basically opening port 443 and 22 for SSH. So if you have a subnet with a NSG already attached, just be sure to add these rules appropriately. So these settings look good, and I'll hit Next. And on the Management tab, I will be using a storage account for boot diagnostics. And we'll scroll down, you see I'm also using auto shutdown because this is in my lab environment. I want to keep my costs down, so I'll hit Next. We're not going to need any of the advanced features today, and we'll hit Next for our tags. And we've added our cost center here, so we know who's paying for these resources. Our application is Veeam Backup. This is our lab environment, and I've got my owner and support contact information here, as well as when my maintenance window is. So we'll hit the Review and Create button, and everything looks good, so let's create. And while our services are deploying, I'll take you over here to the Veeam Help Center, and I'll have this exact link in the description down below. And there's a couple things I want you to take note of under planning and preparation. We'll have all the ports that the solution is going to use, and you see it's 443 and port 22, just like we saw in our NSG rules. And that's for the main processing server, which is called the controller, and also for the worker roles. And under the required permissions link, you'll see as we go to set up the solution in a moment that there's basically two ways to do it, the automated way and the manual way. And I would suggest that you use the automated way. It will do all these things for you rather easily. But at the very bottom here, you can use an existing service account if you want to, and that would come in the form of using an Azure AD application. So we're going to follow these directions under the Getting Started section for rolling out the rest of the solution, which is going to involve accessing our VM. Back in the Azure portal here, our solution has finished building. We'll click on the VM and notice over here on the right that we have an internal private IP address and a public IP address. And we're going to copy our public IP. We'll need that for the next step. And I've opened a new tab with HTTPS to that public IP address, and notice that we do get an error here saying that this connection isn't private. That's because we don't have a certificate on this, but we can click Advanced here in my browser and then go to Continue, and we are met with the Veeam login screen. Now, in here you'll want to use the credentials that you built the virtual machine with, and I'm going to check the Keep Me Logged In and hit Login, and you'll be met with the license agreement, of which of course you will read the entire thing before accepting the terms and then hitting accept. And now we've got just a few configuration steps we need to go through. So we'll click on this first one, and we'll need to add our Azure account to this solution. So we'll click the add button. We'll give it a name. Then we can click next. And here's where you can choose to let Veeam set itself up automatically or to use an existing service account. And if you choose existing, then you'll have to provide the Azure AD application ID, as well as a secret or certificate and your AD tenant ID for that. But I'm going to go back and let this happen automatically and just click next. And now it presents us with a device sign-in. So I'll copy our code and click the link, and then we'll just drop the code right there and click next. Then we'll select whichever account we're going to use as our authorizing account. I'll choose my WVD admin. Because that account is multi-factor enabled, I need to give it my MFA code, and we'll click verify. And our sign-in has been accepted, so we can just close this window. And you can see right in the middle that we are authorized to talk to our Azure account through our WVD admin, and we will click next. Now we have an optional step, and that is to add our account here to an Azure AD group. And you can do this by selecting our box and then picking from the drop-down menu. So I've got a group here that I've created called Veeam Backups, but this is an optional step. You don't need to do this, but this could be useful if you're managing across multiple subscriptions or multiple companies using something like Azure Lighthouse. So I'll click next here, and there's our summary, and we'll click finish. Now that we've added our account, we'll go back to Getting Started, and the next step is going to be to add our workers. Now, before we can do this, we do have one prerequisite we need to do first, and that's because Veeam is going to work at a storage level on our network. Back in the Azure portal, I'll open my virtual network, and we'll go to our subnet where Veeam is going to be set up, and specifically where we're going to deploy our workers. And inside that subnet, if I scroll down here to service endpoints, you need to have Microsoft.storage enabled. Your worker installations will get an error if you don't do this step first. And that's just as simple as clicking the drop down and checking the box for what you want and then hitting save at the top. Now that you've completed that step, we can go back to adding our workers. So we'll click to add on our network here, and you select the region where you want to provision your workers, and I'll be in the East US. And the default VM size here is going to be the A1_B2. Now, if you want to use a different size, you can just click that and then pick whatever size you would like, but that is the recommended default, which I'll be using today. And then we have down at the bottom the maximum number of workers that we want to deploy, and this can go as high as 99. But for my lab here, I'll just stick with the defaults, which is minimum of 1 and maximum of 5. And we'll click next. Then we have to select our network where we're going to deploy our workers, and then select our subnet. Again, this needs to be the subnet that has the service endpoint for storage setup. Then you have the network security group. So I'll be using the same NSG that I had provisioned earlier, and this is an NSG that will be attached to the VM's network card directly. And I'll hit next, and then we'll hit finish. And now it's going through and verifying our status. And if we click the OK here, we can see a checklist of things that it was verifying before it would go through the provisioning process. And one of those steps was to verify that service endpoints were enabled. So if you had failed to do that, you could go back and fix that issue, then press check again, which would validate that you are okay now. And at the top, we'll go to the instance tab, and we've got one worker that is currently in a creating state. And if we go back to the Azure portal, to the resource group where our workers are being built, you can see I've already got the disk, network card, and virtual machine created. So this will be done in just a moment. And while that is finishing, I wanted to also show you in Azure Active Directory under the app registrations, this is where you would find your service account that Veeam had set up automatically. And in this case, it's called Veeam Backup. And if you had chosen to do this manually, you would already have had an app registration that you had created, and you would need to grab the application ID and the directory ID in order to have it use that particular account. Back in Veeam, while our worker is finishing, we can go back to the getting started, and we have another option here, which is to add a repository. Now, repositories are storage accounts that we can work with because the way that Veeam is constructed, we have our workers, which talk to our VMs, take the backup data and send it to our configuration server, and then we need to store that data someplace. And that someplace for long term can be a repository. So at the top here, we'll click add, and I'll call mine storage East US, and I've given it a good description, and we'll hit next. We've already got our cloud account here, so we just have to select that and click next so we know which Azure environment we're talking to. And at the bottom here, you can see I've got a Veeam 0 storage account in East US. That's the one I'll be selecting, and we'll hit next. Now it's interrogating that storage account to see all of the containers, and I've got one here again for Veeam East, which I'll select and hit next. And then at the bottom here, I'll select to create a new folder since I don't have anything yet. And I'll just call it Veeam and hit next. Then if you want to, you can enable encryption on here, but I'm going to leave that off in this case and hit next. And then finish. And if we want to see the log of what's going on here, then we can press this go to sessions. And at this point, it is up to creating our repository. Back in the Azure portal, if we scroll down and go to our Veeam storage account and go under containers into Veeam East, then we have a folder called Veeam with several subfolders here for the clients and configurations. And you'll see more data populating here as Veeam goes and does what it's going to do. And I've also gone and added the second repository for my West US location. So now we can work on protecting virtual machines across multiple Azure regions. And our last prep step in the getting started section is to create our first backup policy. So inside policies at the top, we'll click add, and we'll give it a name and a description and click next. Then you can choose the particular Azure Active Directory that you're going to use this policy on and click next. And then we can add our regions, and I'll check the box here for East US, and if I want, I can have a different policy for West US or add multiple regions to the same policy. And then we'll click next. And this is a very cool feature. This is where we can choose to protect all resources. So all new VMs would be added automatically to be protected. Or we can specify this a little further by saying within a subscription, resource group, particular virtual machines, or ones that have a particular tag. And then we can see all of the different tags that I have in my environment. I've got one here for Veeam Backup, and I'll select that and click add, and then we'll click next. And then you have the option of adding any particular resources that you want to exclude. And I'm going to exclude here my WVD pooled virtual machine because I don't feel that that one needs to be backed up. I have everything stored in FS Logics. So I'll add that as a explicit exclusion and click next. And then when we talk about the backup, we have two different options. We can create snapshots, or we can choose the full VM backup with the differentials or incrementals type backup. And you can certainly use both. So I'm going to choose to take my snapshots periodically every 4 hours, and I'll keep up to 7 restore points, and I'll click next. And then we have the backup schedule. So I'll be hitting select here and choosing my East US repository for long-term storage. And it seems like you can go as long as you want here. 84 months would be 7 years. So that's pretty awesome. And then you can set your schedule at the bottom. And I'm going to have this run every day at 8 p.m. and we'll hit next. And here is a super cool feature. There is a cost estimator right inside this policy. So you could look at each VM that you'd be backing up according to your snapshots and your backup, and then figuring out from the storage account side how much data transaction costs there would be, and it would give you this approximation of your rough cost. So very nice add-in here, and that all looks good to me. So I'll click next. And then finally, you can set the policy retry, and this is automatically set for 3 in case of any kind of failure. And then if you want to be email notified on success, on warning, or failure, and then you can put in your distribution list here or individual email accounts. And I'll leave that off for the moment and just hit next. And then we can review everything here and then click finish. And there is our first policy. Notice that the status is never executed. So this will need to run first. And you can do that right now just by checking the box and clicking start. And that's what I'll do. And we can see now that the policy is running. And if we jump back over to the Azure portal real quick to where my protected VMs are located, you can see that we've got some snapshots that are now created. And inside each of the virtual machines, you can see the tag for application was Veeam Backup, which is why we're snapshotting this VM. Back in the Veeam portal, we can see our policy again is running. And if we go to our protected data tab, you can see we've got one restore point for each of these virtual machines. And if you click on that restore point, we've got a few different options. You can do a full virtual machine restore, or just restore the disks, or you can do a file level recovery. So a lot of granular control here. And the overview gives us a full picture of what's going on. We've got no incidents or alarms. We've got 4 instances in the system. Those are referring to the 4 virtual machines that it knows exist. 2 of them are protected. We do have 1 policy and 2 storage repositories. And if we need to change anything, we can go back to our configuration at the top right, and you can add or remove repositories. And also we can do that with our networks or with our worker instances. And because we had the need due to our workload to create another instance on the fly, that has happened as well. We can see that back in the Azure portal. A second virtual machine has spun up, matches the information inside the Veeam console. And over here on the left, this is where you can add your license, as I alluded to earlier, if you needed to go from a free version to a bring your own license model. And you can do that just by clicking the install license link at the top and then browsing to your appropriate license file. And over on the support information link on the left, you can go here to check for any updates to the software, as well as download your logs in case you're running into some issues. And on the left under settings, we've got some information here about your retention settings. And here's where you can find your certificates for your web interface and your workers. Here's where you can add your email SMTP server settings so that you can do all of that notifications around your policies. And under the system tab, you can even have Veeam back itself up. We could flip our backup here to on and then hit customize settings. We can set our own restore points and how often it's going to back itself up and then retain that data. That seems like a good idea, so I'll do that once a day, but I'll change the time to 1 in the morning and I'll hit save for that. And finally today we'll exit our configuration and go back to our protected data, and we'll take VM number 1 here, and then we'll go to do a restore. So back in the Azure portal, I'm going to take that virtual machine along with its disks, and I'm just going to delete it. Now that the VM and its disk have been deleted, let's go back into the Veeam portal. So we'll click on our 4 different restore points so we can select which one we want. We can choose the ones that are in blob storage or the Azure snapshots, either way. I'll choose the blob storage option, and then under our restore at the top, we'll click to restore the entire virtual machine, and then we'll click next. We've got 2 restore options here, either put everything back exactly where it was, or we can do that to a new location with different settings. And so the options on your left here will change depending on which one you choose. We're going to just go back to the original and we'll hit next, and we can give a reason for this restore, and our VM had been deleted, and we'll hit next and then hit finish. And we can see that our restore job is now running. We can click on running and we can see where we are in our process of restoration. And it looks like our restore has completed successfully. And back in the Azure portal, we can just refresh here, and there is our VM back up and running. So I hope that you've enjoyed looking at this great solution offered by Veeam Backup for Microsoft Azure. That's just one of the many backup services that Veeam has in the cloud today. And of course, there are many others that they have on-prem that have been popular for years as well. And if you like this video or learned something new today, go ahead and click that thumbs up icon. It just lets me know that our video was a help to you. And if you've got any questions or comments on this solution, go ahead and put them in the comments field down below, and I'll certainly try to answer them. And if you are not yet subscribed to the Azure Academy, what are you waiting for? Go ahead and click that subscribe button and join us here at our community where we're just trying to help everybody learn all about Azure. And if you want to get an email that notifies you when our new videos come out, which is about once a week, you can go ahead and click that notification bell as well. And if you're looking for something else to watch, over here on the top right, we've got our latest video, and at the bottom, we've got one we've picked out just for you to help you on your Azure journey. Thanks very much for joining us today, and we will see you in the next video. Happy learning.